Today, we're presenting a list of 12 books about pandemics to help you process the current world crisis and catch up on your reading while social distancing. Hi, it's Andrea here, and this is GT Books. I'm here to guide you on your personal literary journey and expand your reading list with the best books around. If you're new here, make sure to click that subscribe button and remember that you can find all the books mentioned in this video in the description down below. So let's jump into it. As coronavirus slowly becomes a part of our everyday life, many of us are turning to books as a way of educating ourselves about pandemics and, perhaps ironically, as a way of finding some kind of comfort. So, to help you face this moment, here are the 12 best books about pandemics, starting from dystopian fiction and then moving to actual historical and scientific accounts. 1. The Plague by Albert Camus. Camus' masterpiece tells the story of, obviously, a plague, a terrible outbreak sweeping away the city of Oran in northwest of Algeria. While labeled as fiction, the novel is believed to be based on the events following the cholera epidemic that in 1849, right after French colonization, resulted in the death of a large percentage of Oran's population. Through the plot, Camus creates a metaphorical image of the world wrestling with evil, explores questions on the humankind and on the many ways in which we confront death. The Plague is a highly significant novel with plenty of things to keep you thinking far past its last page. 2. The Stand by Stephen King. Thanks to a computer error, a patient escapes from a biological testing facility unknowingly carrying a deadly weapon, a bioengineered strain of superflu capable of wiping out the entire world's population in less than a month. And yet, the destruction of humanity is only the beginning of the nightmare that the main characters face. There is a little bit of everything: horror, political intrigue, war, chaos, and the violence of our human tendencies. One of King's finest works, we believe that The Stand deserves all the praise and admiration it continues to collect worldwide. 3. Pale Horse, Pale Rider by KATHERINE Porter. Pale Horse, Pale Rider is a collection of 3 novels written by the pandemic survivor KATHERINE Porter. The book tells the tale of 2 young lovers, Miranda and Adam, whose lives are disrupted by the 1980 outbreak of the Spanish flu in Denver. A vivid depiction of the suffering caused by the flu and a bittersweet portrayal of young love and mortality, Pale Horse, Pale Rider is sure to make you cry. 4. Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Marquez's novel takes place between the late 1870s and the early 1930s in a South American port city and tells the tale of a young couple against a backdrop of civil war and cholera epidemics. Through this suffered love story, Marquez explores the notions of love, decay, death, and more than anything the idea of love sickness as a real illness, a plague just as painful as cholera. Love in the Time of Cholera is nowadays considered a literary classic and one of the greatest love stories ever written. 5. Blindness by JOSÉ Saramago. A city suffers a mysterious epidemic that leaves its victims unable to see. Quarantined by the government in an empty mental hospital, the blind patients are subject to terror and violence until they find the strength to bond together and escape their confinement. In this haunting, disorienting novel, the Nobel Prize-winning Saramago deals with humans' reaction against evil forces and shows us how the world, ever so concerned by appearances, could deal with the loss of our most beloved sense. 6. ORYX and CRAKE by Margaret Atwood. ORYX and CRAKE is a dystopian novel set in a future where the world has been devastated by the effects of genetic engineering, including a pandemic that has wiped away almost the entire population. The story is told from the point of view of the main character, Snowman, the struggles to survive in a world where he may be the last human. Margaret Atwood once again projects us into a not totally unexpected future that is all too familiar and scary. 7. The Hot Zone by Richard Preston. The Hot Zone is a scary one. In fact, during an interview, even Stephen King himself said this book was one of the most terrifying things he had ever read. Preston's in-depth report explains in detail the origins of one of the most terrifying viruses on Earth, Ebola. In this powerful bestseller, Preston suggests that a human error is partially to blame for the spread of the virus. However, his story puts on the spotlights our real heroes, including the doctors and scientists who risked their life to stop the spread. 8. The Great Influenza by John M. Barry. The Great Influenza offers a combination of scientific research and perspective on the influenza pandemic that in 1920 resulted in the death of more than 50 million people worldwide. Barry traces the origins of this virus in an army camp in Kansas and the spread of the disease to the deployment of American military recruits during World War I. A great portion of the book is also dedicated to basic medical science and research methodology, making this bestseller a very interesting read. 9. Influenza by Jeremy Brown. This short but very enlightening medical science book breaks down the current dialogue surrounding the influenza viruses, summarizing everything from their complex history to the role that the government and pharmaceutical companies have played in the pursuit to find a vaccine. In fact, the book doesn't shy away from the many misinformation swirling around vaccinations. Jeremy Brown, a veteran ear doctor, informs us that many of the most important questions about the flu virus continue to puzzle the experts to this day. 10. Polio, An American Story by David M. Oshinsky. David Oshinsky, a 2006 Pulitzer Prize winner, narrates the history of the polio outbreak and the intense effort to find a cure, covering every step from the famous March of Dimes fundraising and the discovery of the Salk and Sabin vaccines. This bestseller gives an interesting look at both American post-war culture and the powerful disease that sadly marked its course. 11. A Journal of the Plague Year by Daniel Defoe. A Journal of the Plague Year walks the line between fiction and non-fiction. In 1665, the bubonic plague returns to Britain and destroys the city of London, killing almost 1/4 of its population. Over 50 years later, Defoe writes a brilliant and haunting portrait of the city as it fights against the invisible enemy, and, most importantly, he crafts a practical handbook of what to do and what to avoid during an outbreak. 12. Typhoid Mary by Judith LEAVITT. This book tells the incredible story of Mary Mellon, who became known as Typhoid Mary after in the early 900s she infected many New York residents with the deadly virus. Mary was an Irish immigrant who cooked for many wealthy families in New York and didn't realize that she was carrying the disease until a group of scientists tracked her down and forced her to complete isolation. In this book, Judith LEAVITT perfectly recreates the atmosphere of the time, revealing a tragic world of social status divisions and prejudice. Alright, these are our 12 best books about pandemics, but which are, in your opinion, some great books we should have included in this list? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you as always for spending some time with us, and see you next week.